Hi, it's Mr. McIntyre's Electric Scotland. This is my introduction to this week's newsletter for June the 30th, 2017. So without further ado, let me tell you about the stories this week. In the news, the first story I found was the Romanticism of the Scottish Wilderness. Essentially, it's some black and white photographs that were taken over a couple of year period on Tanara Moor, which is the largest island, the Summer Isles archipelago. That's clusters of land that are part of the Scottish Highlands. And frankly, I just loved the pictures. I thought they were just great. So I'm hoping you really enjoy that one if you take the time to look at it. The next article was about the Wolf of Badenoch. It's Scotland's vilest man? Basically says the cruel rampages of Alexander Stewart, Earl of Buchan, were deadly, and his appetite for destruction of his foes simply terrifying. So I thought, well, you know, we've got information on the Wolf of Badenoch on the website, but I thought you might like to read this up-to-date story about him. Then the next story is Scottish folklore traditions in danger of dying out. It says there are tales and legends which are the backbone of Scottish culture and heritage, but the nation's rich folklore tradition is under threat. And of course I do have a huge amount of old Scottish folklore on the site, so if you're really interested in that, and the article actually tells you a few wee stories of some of the old folklore traditions within the article, so I hope you might like to read that. The next article is No Holyrood cannot veto or block Brexit. There's been quite a lot of discussion in the news about whether Scotland could actually block the Brexit deal, and this article basically puts that to bed, that it simply can't. But if you want to know the background to it, this article will tell you all about that. And then the next one I thought was the SNP are great at asking for your views, but nobody's listening. This is something I've been harping on for quite a long time now, about how the SNP doesn't seem to want to listen to anyone and just goes about their job of governing Scotland, listening to themselves or their supporters. And I'm frankly getting a bit concerned about that, because it's not right. I mean, they're meant to be governing the whole of Scotland, and they should be taking the whole of Scotland into consideration. And if you're having all these consultancies but not listening to anyone, I mean, we're never going to make an improvement in the Scottish economy doing it this way. So I hope you like reading that story. Then next one was Scotland's carved Pictish stones are reimagined in colour. It says archaeologists have been uncovering ornately decorated Pictish stones across northern Scotland for many years, and they've got quite a few pictures of the Pictish decorated stones, and they've half coloured in part of the stone to let you see what it might have looked like if it was in colour. So again, I thought that was quite an interesting story. Then, because Harry Potter is really popular, I've got this one of Harry Potter Holiday Itinerary Unveiled. It says Scottish tourism chiefs have unveiled their first Harry Potter holiday itinerary to coincide with the 20th anniversary of J.K. Rowling's famous creation. So for your Harry Potter fans, I thought that might be interesting. Then, reasons to be cheerful despite doom and gloom. And to be honest, if you keep reading about Brexit, it's all doom and gloom these days in the press. And I thought, well, here's an article which gives you something that might give you a little bit of cheer, so I thought I'd put that in. And then because obviously I've got a Canadian website, the article says Canada sees our post-Brexit potential, and so should we. And so it's just a wee article. This is actually from a British guy that's living in Vancouver right now. And so I thought that was quite an interesting wee article. Then another one, our biased broadcasters must admit the EU is no panacea. says Andrea Leadsom has been taking some stick lately when during a BBC interview she called on broadcasters to be a bit patriotic in the reporting of the Brexit negotiations. And I 100% agree with her there, so I wanted to put that in. And there's a further article on that which came from Think Scotland, which was Leadsom was making a good point. Only the willful or ignorant could not understand that. And then we note that Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is to visit Edinburgh. It says Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is to meet the Queen in Edinburgh next week. And then the final story is South Uist flag wins official recognition. So South Uist is to have the first officially recognised community flag in the Outer Hebrides. So I thought you might enjoy that. Then I've got a fair bit up on the Electric Canadian site this week. First one is Eat Right Ontario, and I've actually got the postcard here. This came in my mailbox. In there, he invited me to phone to get answers to your healthy eating questions. Free, easy to use, trustworthy. Call and ask for a free guide. So I decided to call to see what it was about, and as a result I got an email back with some connections for recipes and suggestions and stuff like that. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So I thought maybe I might show you that, because while it's Ontario, I'm sure it will apply to not only the rest of Canada but also to the UK as well. And I thought, well, what is Scotland, what's the UK doing on these kind of things? So I thought to myself, well, it might be worth having a wee read at. Then the next one is Mennonites and Hutterites in Canada. As you know, I have been building up histories of the ethnic races in Canada, but I haven't done anything for a bit. But I came across a video about the Mennonites in, I think it was Alberta, if I remember rightly. And I thought to myself, oh, well, that could be interesting. So I created a new page for them. And of course, if I find any additional information, I'll add it to that page. But there was a video about the Mennonites in Alberta, and then the Hutterites in Canada was the second video. So both these are up for you to read. I also found a book about deadfalls and snares. As you know, I've been putting up a collection of the Beard books, which is all about how to light fires and build cabins and boats and all kinds of things. But I felt you kind of missed out on the deadfalls and snares area, trapping basically. And so when I came across this book, I thought I'd like to add that to his book. So I thought that filled an important gap. And if you actually look at the Alone television series on television, I don't know if you get it where you are, but certainly in Canada we get it, and it's about basically people that are offered, I think it's something like $100,000 if they are the one that can stay on the longest, and they're basically put out on islands or very remote locations, and they have to live off the land, and the television series follows them, and the last one standing basically wins the prize. And I do know that one of the competitors, when he was interviewed afterwards, said that he'd made very good use of the Beard books. So that's partly why I started to put the Beard books up. Okay, and the next one is Indian, Métis and Eskimo leaders in contemporary Canada. This is a collection of 15 biographies which was prepared to illustrate for classroom purposes some of the well-known contemporary Indian, Eskimo and Métis people in Canada today. So I thought that was, I had read it and I was very interested, and I hope you might like to take some time to read some of the stories there. Then the next one I've got is Moonlight and 6 Feet of Romance. This happens to be another Beard book that I happened to find, so I've added that to the collection. Then the next one I've got is 3 Years Under the Canadian Flag as a Cavalry Soldier. This is a peek behind the scenes of political, municipal, military and social life in Canada. And so I've given you a link so you can read that book. And then there's one story in from Conrad Black this week, Not all dissent is created equal, is the title of this story this week. Then on to Electric Scotland. I've put up the last copy I've got of the Folklore Directory Yearbook. It's for 1939. So clearly there's quite a few issues that for some reason haven't been found or scanned in. So it's about, I think the last one I put up was 1921. So that's quite a few years of a gap. So there must be more around, but unfortunately these are the ones I have been able to find. So this is the final one. There's a nice wee note in it in one of the stories about the Queen. So I thought maybe I popped that up for you to read in the newsletter. It's just a short wee story. There's also an article within that saying hints on health for every home. One of which is bleeding from a cut finger or hand can be stopped almost at once with the application of a little lemon juice. Damp a clean piece of lint or any soft material with the juice and apply it at once to the cut, pressing it on firmly. So but there's other little hints there, which I quite like all these old remedies and stuff. Then I found the British Colonial Library has a history of Southern Africa. And as I know a lot of Scots actually settled in South Africa, and I haven't actually found a great deal about those Scots. So I thought if I put this history up, they're obviously going to reference the Scots in it, and they do. So I thought it might be good to kind of help to build a bit more information on the Scots in South Africa. So that book's up. Then I've got the life of Sir Roderick I. Murchison. Basically, he's quite a character, and he's done a lot of different things in his life. And this is mostly an autobiography, but it's kind of been put out as a biography because he wrote in huge detail over most of his life, but decided that it was too detailed, and so he got a friend of his to actually work his way through it all, and he's ended up producing a 2-volume biography of him. And I thought myself, that he's done a lot of work internationally while being a Scot. And I read some, I didn't read the whole thing, but I was reading some of it, and certainly his account of being in the army, in the British Army, was quite interesting. He gave his I kind of enjoyed the wee read, but I didn't have time to read the whole thing, but I would quite like to go back and read more of it. But anyway, it's there if you'd like to read it. Then I've got 3 Burns books this time around. One was Robert Burns and the Scotch Excise Board, because there's a lot of talk and discussion in a lot of the Burnsian places about the fact that he was reprimanded, suspended, or dismissed even by the Board of Excise. And in fact, that's just not true. And this article actually poo-poos all that and gives you some pretty good facts. So I thought you might enjoy reading that one. It's quite short, so it's a good read. Then I've also found one which was the early critical reviews on Robert Burns. This was it's actually published in 1900, but it's obviously before that time. And I thought these were quite interesting, because obviously this is as he was just starting to make his reputation, people were reviewing some of his work. And I just thought you might find that of interest. And then finally, the other one I found was Burns' holograph manuscripts in the Kilmarnock Monument Museum. And this is a book discussing these manuscripts and adding notes to them, because obviously these manuscripts was the basis for the Kilmarnock edition, the famous Kilmarnock edition. So I thought you might find that of interest. Then I've put another People's Yearbook up. This is for the year 1920. There's certainly in this particular one, I got a brief bio of Sir William Maxwell, which I've added to the end of the page where I've got a link to this book. But there's a lot of really good articles in there. There's a lot that frankly is very technical and probably most of us will just gloss over it. But certainly for researchers, it's a great resource. But most of us aren't researchers, we read just for pleasure and for interest. But there is a lot of good stuff to be read in that. And it's one of these ones that you need to, I hope you can scan read things, because I mean I go through a ton of books but I don't read the whole things, but I glean what I want from them. If I think it's interesting I make it available. And the other thing that was quite nice from that is that I thought to myself, you know, when I was with Canadian Foods, which I was with for 7 years, I must have visited almost every co-op store in Scotland. Because I was the area sales manager for Scotland, so I had to go out with my salesmen, and all my salesmen visited. I actually had some saleswomen as well during that 7 years, but we had to call on all the individual co-op stores. So when I'd spend a day with them, wherever it was in Scotland, we'd visit some co-op stores. And I used to visit Scott Mid as a kind of key account manager as well, to set up a deal for them and whatnot. So. And I dealt with them when they were St Cuthbert's. This is before they changed the name to Scott Mid, and I was in their old their old head office, which was a wonderful old building. Anyway, I thought you might be interested, and I actually emailed them to see if they had any kind of history that they might be able to give me, because I gleaned some of the history from their website, but there wasn't a great deal, although what was there was interesting. And they said they actually produced a 150th anniversary book. So they've actually sent me a PDF copy of it, so I've added that to the site. And I think if you're interested in the cooperative movement, you might well find that of interest. And of course, some of you that come from Edinburgh probably went to a Scott Mid store or St Cuthbert's co-op store, so you might find that of interest. I also found in my own archives that I had a PDF file of Migrants in Scotland's population history since 1850. This was a report written by Professor Michael Anderson. He's Professor Emeritus of Economic History and an honorary professor, a professional fellow at the University of Edinburgh. But I mean, because it was population histories from 1850, I thought it was pretty interesting. Because it shows you how many non-Scots actually live in Scotland and are entitled to vote for independence, I might add. And then the final story this week is Best Newfangled Family Tree. She's produced section 1 of the July 2017 edition, so you can read that this week. And the story. I like to try to bring you a story that I'm hoping you might enjoy. And I thought this time around I would bring you a story that I've brought you maybe a few years in the past. It's about the Macgregors by Robert Laidlaw. This was the book that was recommended to you by Douglas Gibson. Now, Douglas Gibson is very big in Canadian literature. He was chairman of Macmillan Books, for example, for a number of years, and he's now got his own publishing house. And certainly he's well regarded in the literature community. And he said the best book, from his point of view, that he ever read about pioneering was this book, The Macgregors, which technically is not. It's a novel, but it's heavily based on fact, because the author himself was brought up in the area he writes about, which is basically the Bruce Peninsula. And of course, so he saw a lot of these old homes that were built there, the farms. And of course, he remembers discussions with his parents and his grandparents. So what he's written is very factual in actual fact. And in fact, his daughter is Alice Munro, who is a Nobel Prize winner for literature. So she's actually very famous. So And I got permission to put this book up because I asked Douglas if it would be possible to get a copy of the book. It wasn't actually in print, so I had to find it from a second-hand bookshop, which I did. I read the whole thing, thought it was brilliant, and I wanted to put it on the site, but it was copyright, and still in copyright. So I talked, because I've met Douglas a few times, and in fact we were both on the board of the Scottish Studies Foundation for a time. So I asked him if it might be possible to get permission to put it up, and because he represents Alice Munro with his publishing house, he said he'd write me a letter, he said, and I'll make sure she gets a copy. And so I did that, and I didn't hear from him for a while, and then I met him again at one of the board meetings, and I said, did you ever talk to Alice Munro about giving me permission to put the book up? He said, oh yeah, he said, yes, you can go ahead. Didn't I tell you? I said, no, you didn't. He said, oh well, you can put it up. So I OCR'd the book in and I put it all up on the site. And to be honest with you, I genuinely think that's a wonderful read. It really explains how the Scots came over from Scotland and settled in Canada, in the Bruce Peninsula in this particular case, and basically turned forest into farms and built the local towns and the roads. And I mean, to me, it's a wonderful story of pioneering. And if you really want to understand pioneering, this book will give you everything you need there. And I just think it's a great read. So I've given you the introduction and the preface and stuff like that for you to read on the newsletter. But I've then put a link to the whole book. And I would hope you'd actually make a point of reading it. And when you've read the whole thing, I'd love you to use the index page for the book to maybe add any comments about what you thought. But I'm kind of wondering how many of you might actually take up the challenge to actually read that book. I can only promise you it's a fantastic read, and I learned a lot from it. So I'm hoping you might enjoy that. So anyway, that's the way I tackled the story for this week. So I hope you'll read it and I hope you'll enjoy it. Okay, so that's the introduction to what I've got in the newsletter, a whole range of interesting material. As always, you won't have time to read everything, but hopefully there'll be something there that you will enjoy dipping into. Thanks for listening, and as always, I'll put a link to the PDF newsletter below the video. Thanks.